my next video, we're going to take a visit to one of my favorite YouTube channels that keep me informed on what's being talked about as far as politics. Is Chris on Culture. So basically in this video, right, I'm not going to say, I know the exact everything about healthcare and government policy when it comes to healthcare, Medicaid, Medicare, and, universal healthcare and all the other stuff. But what I am here to talk about is how government programs, and why they are not liked by so-called centrists and people on the far right. I think Chris, at about the 15-minute mark, comes and put in a couple of points, but I'm going to let Chris Cuomo get this off the ground, and I'll let Chris say what he has to say, because he asked a couple of questions, and I'm going to put in a little bit of input about why certain things are being, done.
Party. This matters to you, okay? The Democratic Party is beset by exactly what befell the once grand old party.
This is a ridiculous false equivalency, because right-wing radicalization and left-wing radicalization are two completely different things. Some people want healthcare, living wages, in a place to live, and a crackdown on credit economy, and asking wealthy people, would you please just pay your damn taxes, is completely different than somebody saying that they want a white country for white people, and that immigrants are stealing jobs, and there's gay people grooming people and all this other shit. These are two completely different political ideologies with two completely different conclusions, and to sit up here and falsely equivocate them is fucking ridiculous. This is why people like Hakeem Jeffries, John Fetterman, the Clintons, and we're in a slow process of it, but these people need to be kicked out of the Democratic Party. Like, go be a fucking Republican if you want to uphold social progress. We don't need people like you in our party, because we're actually trying to make a difference for the working man. And if you don't want to do that, go be a fucking Republican.
Which is now merely MAGA. Now it is the left, powered by populist outrage about affordability and some other more fringe aspects, but affordability is a real thing, and they're right to be outraged about it in America. They're right about what's wrong. But as was the case with MAGA, after that outrage, do they have the...
Well, this motherfucker is like really up here saying like, yeah, you have the right. Yeah, things are expensive. That's good to talk about it, especially if you're demeaning Republicans, but actually fixing it, I don't know. I don't know if we should actually fix inequality, and I'm going to talk about why pundits like this exist after I get to the 15-minute mark, and I'm going to skip forward. But there's a reason why rhetoric like this exists, and I guess I'm just going to speak off the top of my head as a working man in my experiences, raising a family and what have you.
Ideas to make it right. Now, I think the answer with MAGA to this point is no. Will this mega movement on the left do better? Takes you to another question. Is it reasonable to accuse the rest of the Democratic Party of quitting?
Yes.
Because they're trying to end this shutdown before they got a real concession on health care? I say hell no.
Yes.
Because it was...
Yes, it is. Yes. Because what you people need to learn to do is to... Because what happened there, right? And... I'm not too sure about the ins and outs of that, but it seems like a situation where we got temporary gains for long-term harm, right? So the people lost their healthcare subsidies, and people's healthcare premiums when they pay at the hospital are going to double and triple because those government subsidies aren't there. But temporarily, you get your government healthcare back, and you get your food stamps and your social security checks, and the federal workers get paid. So it's temporary gains for a large amount of losses, and that's the problem that so many people have with the government, with the Democrats ending the government shutdown, because it was bigger than that. Because it's like, I'd rather go a few more weeks without food stamps or without my pay as a federal worker and shit like that. People are going to have to suffer, but the suffering is the fault of the Republicans. Because what people need to ask themselves improper is that, why are the Republicans trying to take away social programs that are helping people? Why are Republicans trying to force people to pick food stamps, Social Security, and federal worker pay, or raise your healthcare premium. You know, it shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't be a pick either or. You pay more here or you pay more there. Across the board, right? And I'm sure any smart person can say this across the board. You know, we can say that, you know, that workers, you know, should get both their government assistance program and low healthcare premiums. It should be both. It shouldn't be one or the other. Not to mention, you know, all the subsidies and all the other shit that's paid out to people. But the point being is that, yeah, you know, and that's the problem. And people are sick of Democrats getting temporary gains. You know, like, you know, the child tax credit, as good as it was, that's an example. But in long term, stuff like that is repealed or is turned over because Democrats put in loopholes to reverse these policies, right? Or vote against these policies with Republicans. And people are tired of that, of temporary gain for long-term harm. And people are starting to notice what's going on. And people are then speaking of kicking these do-nothing-ass Democrats out of the party. Because it's like, you know, and that's how I feel. If you want to withhold socioeconomic progress for working people in this country, minority or otherwise, go be a fucking Republican. We don't need you with a D next to your name. Go be an R.
Never going to happen this way. And I'm not being a cynic.
You are.
I'm looking at history and logic. I've said from the beginning. Okay.
But that's the issue, especially within the past 40 years. The Democrats have never clamped down and committed to any issue. They moved the goalposts to be more palatable to right-wing framing. It's like that one speech Chuck Schumer made in the More Perfect Union video I went over a couple weeks ago. Is that for every radical leftist we lose, we have to pick up one white suburban Republican. Like, and y'all live off that logic, and we keep losing, and we keep looking like hypocrites. Cause y'all don't understand how to stand for something and to be a roadblock between the people in poverty and desperation. And, you know, but like I said, I'll get into that in a second, but yeah.
The Democrats have the right issue, affordability, healthcare specifically, the costs. But they're doing it the wrong way. Yeah, why? The facts.
We shouldn't change anything. We can't do that. We can't actually make a policy that helps people. We can't. We just can't do it. That's
if you go all the way back to 1976, no shutdown has ever yielded any meaningful policy change at the behest of the minority. Fact. I don't care what anybody else says. I don't care how they spin it. They are lying if they say anything else. President Reagan, President Bush, they had 2-3 day shutdowns where they got a little bit of a movement on the needle of what they were asking for at the time, but that was different. Okay? It was about...
Yeah, and this is fucking different too, because we're talking about people paying 2 to 3 times as much, you know, people like me, for their health care if I get injured or some shit like that. Versus, you know, whatever the hell that was about. Because again, we got temporary gains for, you know, long-term harm. And I'm gonna skip forward a little bit, because I ain't gonna listen to all that, like, for real.
Pass a cap on health care costs, that nobody gets paid more than we pay through Medicare. And what they mean will be part of the punishment. But here's the...
Okay, so I wanted to let that pretty much roll so you could hear all of it and then give my thoughts mostly at the end. Chris Cuomo isn't wrong about everything that he says here. He's wrong about most of what he says. Because he's got to get his both-siderism. He's got to be a centrist through and through. The parts that I agree with are mainly him talking about access versus affordability. It's that idea of, yeah, Lamborghinis exist. So, you know, a politician can say, well, anybody can buy a Lamborghini. You know, if they work hard enough and make enough money, you in theory have access to a Lamborghini. But can you afford a Lamborghini? Most of us cannot. So we have the same thing in our healthcare system where it's like, yeah, you have access. You know, the Republicans say all the time, anybody can go to the emergency room. Sure. And then you get hit with a gigantic bill. So Chris Cuomo is right about that aspect. I think he's a little bit right about that neither side wants to give the other one a win.
Of course not.
That plays into, but I think that's a small part.
That's
Again,
basic politics.
that gives you the, well, both sides are equally bad. The Republicans are bad, the Democrats are bad. You know, who's really to blame here? Who's really the bad guy? Where I would disagree is a lot of his framing is right-wing framing. He talks about, yes, oh, it's free, but nothing's free. Everybody knows that this is, oh, nothing's free. There's no such thing as a free lunch. That's every Facebook debate I've ever seen. That's morons on Twitter. If you say, hey, you know, Medicare for all, well, how do you pay for it? Nothing's free. Yeah, we never have this conversation about the next military budget. It's going to be $1 trillion. You're never going to have Chris Cuomo on TV saying, where does this $1 trillion come from? Who's paying for that? Everyone knows that it would come from taxes, and right-wingers love to act like we're taxed to death in the United States. We have a top tax rate right now of 37%. In the 40s through the early 80s, we had a tax rate anywhere from 70 to 90%, a top marginal tax rate. Back then, corporations accounted for about 1/3 of all taxes. Now, less than 10% of taxes are paid by corporations. All of those expenses get passed on to the middle class, basically. So we could, you know, raise taxes some in the United States. We could actually require corporations like Amazon, who often pay zero taxes, to actually pay some taxes. And we could have a little bit of an increase at the top. Maybe have a 40% tax rate instead of a 37% tax rate. It doesn't have to be 90% like it was at one time in this country, a time when the greatest middle class in the world was ever built. So there's that. He also brings up that I see all the time, well, these, you know, Germany, Canada, these other countries, they're homogenous societies, which to me always just sounds like racism. They're just saying, well, these are white countries. And the United States...
And this is where I'll pop in a little bit. It's because centrist liberals are often at the time racist people who don't want to see black people and other minorities benefit from social programs, right? Because especially when we're referring to minority groups, especially black people in America, a subsystem of workers has to continue to exist, right? And part of that subsystem that keeps black people working is, you know, is poverty, debt, you know, and credit, and all these other barriers were put up, and these social programs were taken away because they know that black people are hurt worse than white people. And people like Joe Biden, to an extent Barack Obama, and all these people like Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, with these centrist policies that don't actually help people with you know, when they're dealing with poverty and stuff like that, are a part of the problem. They are a part of the system of, you know, in-country apartheid against not only working class white people, but especially black and Hispanic people and others that are working in this country. They are complicit and aware of the damage and danger of there not being government assistance programs to help working people in this country, but they're just okay with it because some people are hurt more than others. In a terror of poverty, and this is what I mainly want to get to, I'm gonna let Chris talk a little more, has to exist in this country. More on that in a second.
As you know, we have more minorities here, which I don't know percentage wise exactly what the breakdown of those other countries are. But what does that really mean? Racist. Somehow, somebody who's not white, if they break a bone, their bones are different. You know, what are Chris Cuomo and you know, I don't think he's trying to be racist here.
He is.
That always sounds like a racist far right idea to me.
Because it is.
The way I would turn this around is to say, hey, if these other countries like Germany and France and Canada can do this, why can't the United States, the richest, most powerful country in the world? I have a good friend who lives in Spain. He says, we've figured this out. Why can a small country like Spain do this, but a big, rich, powerful country like the United States cannot?
It's because, and I guess I'm basically in the video here. I'm gonna let Chris finish out his thoughts in this video. But what I'm going to say specifically, right, and this is not just referring to healthcare. This applies to any government program, from public transportation to healthcare to food assistance to to anything that you can think of that the government, government housing programs and what have you, government rent regulations, zoning laws, and so forth. All this stuff that the government can intervene on not only makes society safer and healthier for working class Americans, but it takes debt off of your shoulders. So if you have Medicare for all in America, this automatically takes away medical debt from millions of American citizens, right? So the corporations that are first hurt by this are health insurance companies. The health insurance companies will automatically be unprofitable if the government start, offering more government assistance when it comes to healthcare. And it goes even far beyond that. But because you will see that when people don't have to pay healthcare costs, they might start paying their other bills. They might start paying their credit card debt. They might start catching up on their rent. And then, with these government assistance programs of any kind, the terrorism of debt, poverty, start to disappear because people start to be able to keep up with their cost. And one cost that will be lifted off millions of people in America, and this is not even mentioning the people that just have medical debt, right, would be their healthcare costs and their healthcare premiums and what have you. And these large corporations of any kind don't want that. Your phone company doesn't want you to not have medical debt or student loan debt. Credit card companies want you to have medical debt. So you have to juggle. You have to be scared. You have to be at work every single day because you have to figure out, the difference between paying on your electricity bill or paying your healthcare premium or what have you, especially the ones that come through the government, or paying on the bill that you got from the hospital, or paying your car note. This system of desperation and impoverishment and class warfare is predicated on inadequate systems that maintain a state of disarray and economic terrorism on working class people. So that's why people like Chris Cuomo exist, right? And even people to the further right of him, like Patrick Bet-David and what have you, they exist for a reason. Candace Owens, all these people exist for a reason. These people that are propped up by these large multinational corporations, because you have people, right? And you will notice that their podcast program, and I'm not saying this is Andrew Cuomo's, is paid for by an oil lobby, but they're not even talking about environmentalism exclusively and how global warming and stuff like that isn't this, that, or the other. They will talk about healthcare costs because oil and gas companies and all the companies you can think of love seeing Americans being squeezed for more and more money. So if you step out of line, you take a day off, you decide not to pay this or that bill, you have an emergency, you're being squeezed. And that terrorism of poverty, of homelessness can always remain. And that's why talking points like this exist. And that's why.
Which I agree. I think the United States can do anything they want if they want to do it. Chris Cuomo also talks about the ACA. Well, they did the ACA because it would be too hard to do anything else. No, they did the ACA because they wanted the insurance companies to be involved.
Exactly.
The centrist, corporatist Democrats wanted the...
Because again, if we have universal health care in America, that that not only leads to people being able to go to the hospital for pretty much free, if not completely free in some cases, I'm sure, that also leads to, like I said, people don't have medical debt. Millions of people will no longer have medical debt. And of course, a lot of people working both in the government and people working, people working in the government and people working, what am I looking for? In these various different industries, some of which have nothing to do with healthcare, don't want working class Americans to have one less bill.
Insurance companies to be involved so they could continue to make a lot of money. Chris Cuomo leaves that part out. They didn't not do Medicare for all because it would be too hard. They didn't do Medicare for all because they didn't want to. They didn't want to take the
It was a
profit
Heritage
motive
Foundation
out
policy.
of the system because they're corporatists. Chris Cuomo wants to act like Bernie Sanders' wing of the party has all this power when Bernie Sanders, AOC, the Squad, they're a tiny minority of the Democratic Party.
But he has to act like
the
that.
corporatists, the centrists, the establishment Democrats control everything. There is no real left in this country that has any power, but the centrists like Chris Cuomo love to make out like there is. There were lots of people on the left that said, hey, at least you can do the ACA, have the corporate insurance companies involved and all that, but offer people a public option. Allow people to buy into Medicare. That would have been a compromise. Instead, Obama and the Democrats went with what was a Republican plan implemented by Mitt Romney in Massachusetts. So the compromise would have been a public option. But they didn't want to do that either because, again, the left has no real power in this country. So ultimately, Chris Cuomo does the thing that right-wingers always do. I'm not saying Chris Cuomo is a right-winger. He's a centrist. But that right-wingers always do. Well, we can't do this, and we can't do this, and we can't do this, and we can't do this. But they never offer a real solution. He didn't really offer a real solution here. One other thing that he brought up that's Republican framing, which was something that I just thought about for the first time today. Right-wingers love to act like they care about the insurance company employees. So if you say, oh, let's do Medicare for all, well, what happens to all the insurance company employees?
They should get a different fucking job. Like, I hate when they do this shit because they always have to bring out that defense when we talk about making life better for people. Oh, what about these people who work here? What about these people that do that? What about the people that own businesses that can't afford to pay minimum wage? Well, that means that you're working in a pyramid scheme and you need to get your ass up and get a job. That's what that means.
They're all going to lose their jobs. They're going to lose their jobs anyway through AI. All the people that are denying the claims and, you call in and you wait for an hour to speak to somebody. That's, what do we got left on that?
That's
5 years, maybe a decade before virtually all of those people are replaced by AI. So they're not going to be able to use that excuse anymore. Chris Cuomo and the right-wingers that he's siding with here. So let me know what you think. What I'd really like.
Yeah, I already let them know what I think. But the point of, again, and I reiterate at the end of this video to make sure that I'm clear, right? So I'm not going to act like I'm some healthcare policy expert. But what I do know is that government assistance programs, right, of any kind. I actually learned a little bit listening to Chris here. But government assistance programs of any kind help lift people out of poverty. That frees up money so people can pay for other things, right? So even if you're like me and I pay a healthcare premium for my wife and my child, right, out of my paycheck, that will free up that $150 or so to go towards more bills. And corporations, even outside of health insurance companies, don't want that. They want the idea of economic terrorism and poverty to continue to exist. The idea that you have to choose between paying for your health care or paying your car note, or paying your car note and paying your rent. Healthcare, student loan debt, credit, and all these things exist in the way that they do to be terrorism against working people in this country, to make sure that if you dare step out of line, you miss a day of work, you get fired, that you get fucked. And that's the point of, Chris Cuomo's, ideas here, is he does not want money that to be freed up for working people to go towards other things so that you might live a slightly better life and take care of a couple of things. Because like I said, the idea of economic terrorism must always exist under capitalism. But hey, I'm not saying that things can't get better, but that's where this idea comes from. It's coming from the idea that working people should never have money to pay for something else. And then if you don't have money to pay for X or Y, you're just not working hard enough. The logic has to be extremely simplistic, extremely ignorant, and tone deaf in order to maintain that economic terrorism on working class people. Video credit obviously goes to Chris on Culture here. I appreciate his little splices of videos. I learned a lot from his channel. You should check him out.